Well, what we have for us on this Saturday is the return of some more balance tuning, or simply some more changes to specs planned for patch 10.0.7, which is bound to go live either by the end of this upcoming next month, so March, or the very early start of April. So what we have in terms of changes, we have retouches to Frost, Death Knight, to Feral, Druid, we have some Paladin, we have some Shaman being addressed by Blizzard in these additional set of changes for patch 10.0.7. So let's go and take a look at what is bound to happen for the specs. The first in line to get some changes, which overall is going to net out to be a buff, is Frost Death Knight. So Frost Death Knight has the damage of Breath of Sindragosa increased. It also has the damage of Frost Strike increased. What is the catch in this? The catch is that now the runic power cost of Breath of Sindragosa goes from 16 to 18 per second, and the one for Frost Strike goes from 25 to 30. The TLDR resolution of Blizzard is that Frost Death Knight is overcapping too much in runic power. They are wasting too much runic power, they are generating too much runic power without knowing what to do with it. So the solution is make their abilities do more damage, but in return make them cost more runic power, in an attempt to making them dump more runic power and make them overcap less in runic power. So that is the first change planned for 10.0.7 towards Frost Death Knight. Also a good target for 10.0.7, since it's not that Frost Death Knight is doing too well right now. Next in line, we have another change, we might even say a communist change, because this is a redistribution of wealth towards Feral Druid. Because their big cooldown, Berserk, gets nerfed, in the sense that Berserk now bleeds targets for 100% of the damage dealt by combo point generators instead of 125%. What is the return for this change? The return to Feral is that Merciless Claws now increases the damage of Swipe and Brutal Slash by 15% instead of 10%, and that Shred, Swipe, Brutal Slash and Trash damage are increased all by 6%. Once again, the TLDR of Blizzard is that you are doing too much damage. Too much damage is concentrated in one cooldown. So what we are doing is we are taking away some of the damage from your cooldown and moving it, redistributing it to your other standard abilities, so that your damage will be more consistent even outside of your Berserk burst window. That's another important change given to Feral. Talking about important, what is not important is the change to Evoker. Evoker gets a buff to Ouroboros once more. Now the time to properly stack up this buff goes from 10 casts of Echo to 5 casts of Echo. The result is more or less the same. The effect itself is still quite weak, as long as the Evoker itself is not playing with the Emerald Blossom build, so this is still not really going to amount to much. So as far as a healer change for Evoker is not really very effective. What is more effective for healers are the changes to Mistweaver. So Mistweaver, besides a very standard 10% more healing buff to your Enveloping Mist, gets a sort of like a mechanics change. One is to Lesson of Fear, which increases now your haste. One of the possible buffs increases your haste by 20% instead of 25%. The justification for this by Blizzard is that this buff was the strongest one, so we don't want to push the Mistweaver to try to fish for the proper good buff out of Lesson of Fear. Sort of like the rogues trying to fish for the proper dice in Roll the Bones, basically. So they are lowering the effectiveness of this particular buff for Mistweaver as well. In return, Shalun's Gift gets his healing increased. Initially, from the patch itself, it was planned to be increased by 10%, now it's planned to be increased by 20%. So we have gotten so far this theme of redistributing the effectiveness of certain abilities. We have gotten one for Frost Death Knight, with redistributing more damage at the expense of costing more runic power, redistributing more damage to Feral outside of their big burst windows, as well as redistributing more healing outside of a very powerful haste buff you might have gotten from Lesson of Fear. Now, what is not really about redistributing, but more about reworking is, of course, Paladin. Now, we have gone through Paladin already. We have an entire video dedicated to the rework of Ret Paladin in particular. So we definitely have way too many changes here to follow them one by one. What I wanted to highlight in this set of changes is that right now, pending some further changes, Retribution Paladin is setting itself up to be one of the tankiest specs in the game, especially for DPS. Divine Protection is now baseline, so you don't have to spend a talent for it. You have to spend a talent, but you always will spend a talent for Shield of Vengeance. Now, both of these have been buffed and will be further buffed by Aegis of Protection, by giving you 10% more DR on Divine Protection, so now it's a 30% damage reduction, and also a 30% extra max HP shield on Shield of Vengeance, which is now going to be 60% of your max HP into a shield. Both of these with Unbreakable Spirit, which is also somewhat a talent you always take, will bring down the cooldown of these two defensive talents to just 1 minute, which is also very, very good. Not only that, the rework of Paladin also brings you Sanctified Plates, which gives you 20% more armor, so less damage taken from physical attacks. It gives you 10% more stamina, so 30 to 35,000 more HP for free, and also 10% less damage taken from AoE abilities. That's already a very, very good starting point for being quite of a tanky spec. Not only that, you also now have access to Light's Celerity, which puts Flash of Light on a 6-second cooldown, which is fine because you don't really spam Flash of Light, but now you have an insta-cast Flash of Light, which heals you for 50% more, which is going to be very, very good for a DPS, right? To use this right after you take a massive hit, or maybe to use this right before you're about to take a massive hit to make sure you are at full HP and you're not gonna die, for example. You also have something that many specs have already, one of those, very self-sufficient specs with a lot of leech that can heal themselves for a lot, like Havoc Demon Hunter, like Fury Warrior. You have something similar now, something like Crusader's Reprieve, which gives you 2% of your max HP whenever you use your Crusader Strike, as well as Fading Light, which is gonna give you a 20% absorb shield based on the damage of your generators. So you're gonna have a whole plethora of tools now to stay alive, to be more tanky, to be more self-sufficient as a Ret Paladin. So this already is the first win of your upcoming rework as a Ret Paladin. Many of the other features are still in a work in progress for Ret, particularly around the rotation, around their abilities, the set of talents empowering either your Judgment or your Blade of Justice, a few other additions like making your Judgment or your Blade of Justice become AoE, start hitting multiple targets, for example. The Divisive, the Revolutionary, Crusading Strikes, which is going to make your Crusader Strike passive automatically work with your auto attacks and you don't have to click it by yourself anymore. However, as we wait for this rework to be fully done, so we can actually inspect how the spec is looking like, what you need to know for now is that there are still no planned changes from the original rework of Retribution Aura. Okay, that's what's important right now. What is important is that at the moment you still have a guaranteed raid spot because of this aura by itself. If you assume a Holy Paladin has its spot in the raid because of Devotion Aura, then you will need an extra Paladin for Retribution Aura in your raid group. Of course, it would be quite hilarious if Protection Paladin also becomes meta at the same time and is gonna end up being the Paladin broth for Retribution Aura instead of the Ret Paladin. That would be funny but also sad at the same time, but still it's quite a unique situation to have a single class have two different players required in the raid. at the same time because of some must-have buffs. That's quite the unique situation that we will have after patch 10.0.7. Now, besides the Paladin changes, we have a few left for Shaman. These are not nearly as exciting, but then again, Resto Shaman has been on quite a roll of positive additions, so this one is not nearly as important, but it's not also nearly as needed. Resto Shaman gets a buff to improved Primordial Wave, increasing the healing done by Healing Wave after you have casted your Primordial Wave by 13 to 25% instead of 8 to 15. Nothing really groundbreaking, nothing really too powerful. The other change is something that could be powerful if the talent itself was strong to begin with. The improved Earth Living weapon increases the healing of Earth Living by 20 to 40% instead of 15 to 30, and it's always gonna trigger on targets below 18 to 35% HP instead of 13 to 25. So roughly a 50+% increase of this talent. The problem is this talent was weak to begin with, and the problem is this talent was on the wrong side of the talent tree, the side that Shaman was kind of ignoring to go the opposite direction. So that's kind of the current problem of this set of talents for Resto Shaman. As I said, at the very least, Resto Shaman is one of the specs that has been on the rise recently, has been given quite a lot of attention from Blizzard recently. So even if these buffs don't really hit the mark for Resto Shaman, I wouldn't complain too much at the moment. For last, for our changes, we have our freshest change, which is the one to Hunters, and in particular to Neltharax, the bow dropping from Razageth, which has kept many hunters trying to grind this boss even in LFR or normal difficulty just because this bow was so powerful. Blizzard is fixing the power of this bow, much like we talked about some of the other specs today. They are shifting away the power of the bow into the actual specs, so that you don't have to rely so much on actually having the bow. Previously, this bow wasn't just increasing the auto-attacking speed of yourself, but also of your pets, which is why it was also such a massive damage gain for Beast Mastery Hunters. So Blizzard is now modifying this. Instead, now it's just going to increase your auto-attack damage, also no longer increasing the auto attack damage of your pets. What do you get in return? Serpent Sting damage is increased by 25% and Death Chakran damage is increased by 100%. This is true for all of the Hunter specs. In particular, for marksmanship, you gain 25% more damage to Arcane Shot and to Chimera Shot, and 15% more damage to Multi-Shot. The spec which would be hurt more by this change to how the bow works would be Beast Mastery Hunter, which is why they get a bigger buff. 25% more damage to Kill Command, 25% more damage also to Barb Shot and to Stomp, the AoE talent for your pet, as well as 50% more damage to your Cobra Shot. This is in an attempt to shift away some of the power of this bow into your default strength for your spec, which of course will become relevant also as we enter patch 10.1, as we enter a new season and you eventually have to give up this bow. You're not going to be losing nearly as much power as you would have if it kept the effect it had before this change coming in patch 10.0.7. But besides that, these were all of the changes for today, for this update of 10.0.7 with some of the balance tuning planned for the patch. I'm going to leave you now on this Saturday to whatever else you were planning to do on this weekend. Thanks, of course, as usual, as we start by thanking my Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of this channel. Growth which can also be given for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Further support can be given by following me over on Twitter at this link, as well as following me on my stream over at Twitch. Now, with these social pleasantries out of the way, it's time to leave each other. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, which is likely tomorrow. And in the meantime, I made it in time. I wanted to finish this video before I had to go eat, and I'm like 10 minutes early. That's perfect.